Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the ADHD Eavesdrop, where you can be a butterfly on the wall and listen in on my conversations. Today, I have Jonathan Lofgren out in Montana. He is a good friend of mine from my course when I became a coach. He is also an ADHD coach, has a history of education, working in corporate development and training, and now has been late diagnosed in life with ADHD and has looked for a change in his career that will allow him to really touch and make changes in people's lives who've gone through the same thing with the ADHD. And we're going to hear all about that story of Jonathan getting diagnosed and the struggles that he went through. So, welcome, Jonathan. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Janine. It's good to be here. Good to see you again and great to be here.
The first time I ever met you, Jonathan, you and I were in our class together to become ADHD life coaches. Both of us
Mhm.
are late diagnosed folks. I think you were later diagnosed than I was. How old were you?
It was at least 6 years ago, maybe 7 years ago. It took me by complete surprise, honestly. I had been through some, different tests about why my brain was working the way it was and why I was feeling the way I was and being frustrated and just feeling different in a lot of ways and keeping it inside myself. And I finally went to this doctor an MD who is specialized in ADHD and its treatment. And he gave me a test, and honestly, I was quite skeptical at the time, and was just kind of pretty down about my journey. And I went there, and anyway, what he said and what we started on as far as the treatment goes, it was a life-changing event for me, and it was really great. And then part of me was thinking, oh, I wish I'd known this years ago, but at the same time, I'm at it. I'm where I am today because of knowing it 6, 7 years ago, and I'm just grateful for that because it's changed my life to be able to finally start getting a grasp on
Mm.
this. It was really hard for a while, for years.
So when you say, trying to figure out why your brain worked differently and why it was working the way it was working, what was happening in your life that made you like go, there's something different here?
Yeah, I don't talk about this a lot. At least I haven't yet. I am more now because of my late diagnosis. It's just kind of been more recent history. But I started out grade school as what I felt like was a really happy, normal kid. And then between third and fourth grade, I was visiting a friend in another state, and we were racing on our bikes down a hill, and I crashed and I just smacked my head on the concrete and slid for I don't know how many feet. And I never went to the hospital, and my parents kind of patched me up, and we went on our way on our family vacation. And I never put the pieces together back then that that was between third and fourth grade. And when I started fourth grade, suddenly everything was so much harder. I couldn't concentrate. I was never, I have ADHD, and I was never hyperactive or that side of the diagnosis, but suddenly I was just struggling to concentrate, and my grades, I was getting good grades without really even worrying ever about schoolwork. I mean, I wasn't brilliant, but I was a good student, and I studied, and I always got good grades. And suddenly I was getting C minuses and C's, and I just was, I didn't know why. My parents didn't know why. They said, you need to study more. And I said, yeah, I need to study more. It just stayed hard after that. My level of concentration, everything was hard after that, starting from the fourth grade on. And I worked hard and still got good grades, not as good a grades as I was before, quite, but I worked hard, and yet there was still always this when I would get good grades, and I'd look at my fellow students and I'd think, well, they got a good grade or they didn't get a good grade or whatever. And sometimes I thought, do they just worry and slave over this to get a good grade on this test as much as I had? Because I just had to go over it over and over again to be able to get it in my head. And it was just so much harder. And I didn't know why. And then when I was tested with a couple of different tests at this MD's, and he came back with the diagnosis, and he showed me exactly where my brain was impacted and the injury and what it had contributed to my processing in my frontal lobe. suddenly I was like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? And I was still, honestly, I was skeptical at first because it just took a while to convince me because I'd been through so many different ways of trying to deal with just how I was feeling and how my brain was processing things that I couldn't at first bring myself to accept it. And then gradually I did. Anyway, with the resulting insights and also medication too, it has changed my life and so much for the better. And it's still a journey, right? I mean, there's so many things that I'm still learning, but there's so many pieces to the puzzle that have fallen into place. And if there's anything I've learned, it's that, boy, be careful passing too quick a judgment on people because you just don't know what's going on inside them. And
Well, and
I just
sometimes they don't know what's going on
that's right. I
either.
didn't know either. That book, you mean I'm not lazy, stupid, or crazy? I think it is. And I never thought I was crazy, but I thought a lot of times I just am so lazy or I'm just so dumb because I can't get this. And yet this had happened to me, but I just didn't realize that I didn't realize what was going on. And now that I know, it's a world of difference. And I'm so much more sympathetic to myself too.
Yeah, learning how to give ourselves grace is one of the hardest ones. So much of what you just said like really rings with me, but the biggest thing that I keep going back to over and over again, and I hear it again and again from clients and from people I talk to with ADHD is that whole idea that, yeah, I can do this, but why is it so much harder for me to do
Yeah.
it than everybody else?
Yeah, it's so true. And I remember when I was in college, I was working retail, and we came out of a an employee meeting, and I was just one of the people on the floor helping customers, and after the meeting, I asked a couple of questions to my manager in the men's department where I was, and I asked him a question, he answered it, and then I asked him another question. He goes, "Were you at the same meeting I was, Jonathan?" I immediately shut up, and I didn't ask any more questions because I was in there. I was trying to concentrate, but I was just unable to sometimes. And so when I heard that, of course I wasn't diagnosed then. And I heard that and I thought, yeah, I'm just lazy in a meeting because I'm not paying attention.
Mhm.
And it was just an affirmation to me, a false one, that don't ask so many questions.
Sure,
So
absolutely. And how many times does that happen to us as kids? Even, like we didn't hear what the teacher said, and so we ask again, and the teacher gets mad because you weren't listening, and then you end up not getting the information. And that's not even a difficulty with learning, it's a
yeah,
difficulty with retaining and communicating information. It's frustrating. I can remember for me, I got really, really good at masking. And so I would look like I was really paying attention. Like I'm right, Johnny on the spot there. Everybody knows that I'm paying attention, right? Taking notes,
exactly.
that say
Nodding your
nothing,
head, good eye contact.
all
Yeah.
the things. And I was even good at being able to come up with an answer that would work, right? Like it might not be
Yeah.
the correct answer, but it might be enough of an answer that the teacher would be like, well, close, or whatever. I always got, she pays great attention. She's such a good student. And I was so oblivious at
Yeah.
the time.
It's so true what you just said. I mean, I totally can relate to that as well because I've been told many times, Jonathan, you are a good listener. And I think I am a good listener. But I also think that there are times where I thought, wow, this person doesn't know that I was just 1,000 miles away. But the whole time I was looking at them straight in the eye and nodding my head and, giving them the cues to keep going. And yeah, I'm totally dialed into what you're saying. And then I come back to it.
That's
But
such a great demonstration of why everything is so much harder for us because, like, a neurotypical person just listens, right?
yeah.
And for us, it's like we listen, we lose concentration, we have to do the extra work of bringing ourselves back and the extra step of trying to figure out what we missed without letting anybody know that we just missed something, right? So we've got all this other work that's going on in our brain while we're just listening to a conversation.
Yeah, exactly. It's so true. And I think when you're not when you're in our condition in this situation, you just learn to be very good at weaving through. So because you're used to feeling bad about I missed that, or my boss. Were we in the same meeting, Jonathan? You just learn after a while to be gun shy, and so you learn strategies to avoid the embarrassment or whatever, and yet you're still struggling with it inside.
And that's where the masking comes from.
Yeah,
Because it's
exactly.
like, okay, I got to put on the mask that says, I heard everything. I know what you're talking about. And you have to maintain that mask. It's exhausting by the end of the day. I don't know. Do you ever watch Deep Space Nine, Star Trek?
Well, I haven't watched that one. I am a Star Trek fan. I mean, I'm a huge Star Trek fan, but I haven't seen that one yet.
So, for those of you who know, you know. Those of you who don't know, there's a character on there that is, he can change form, right? But he can only hold a form for so long, and then he like falls apart and he has to go like into a jar and regenerate, right? And
That's awesome.
sometimes I think about my ADHD self like that too. I can only hold that mask for so long. I can only hold that myself together for so long before I have to deteriorate into a pile of goo.
Yeah, I think that's so true because speak for myself, even though I can use and learn these kind of my own coping skills, that mask is just exhausting after a while.
Mhm.
It's just like, oh, I can't pretend on this all the time. And you have to step away and you become, that jar of goo or whatever. For me, it's like I am so not feeling like I'm being my genuine self, right? Because I'm putting on this mask or this front, and people don't know how I'm processing it on the inside, and they think all is great. And I'm just like, oh man. And then I go away and I feel, oh, I faked them out. I'm kind of an imposter. I'm a
One of
hypocrite or
my
something.
my favorite phrases, it has throughout my life been, boy, if they only knew the truth
Yeah.
about me, right? It's like, oh, they're gonna figure it out. Like
Yeah.
I've told people, oh, I'm great at giving a snow job, not the other snow. Yeah. And yeah, I can make you think everything's great. But when the mask starts to slip and you have to try to pull it back into place in that moment. So like with your boss, were you in the same meeting? You quickly pulled that mask back up, right? You're like, oh, oops. So like for me, it was crying. My genuine self, very emotional, cry easily, cry when I'm frustrated, angry, all of those things, which is not uncommon for people with ADHD to be very emotive. We feel deeply, right? But as soon as a tear would come, it's like, oh, I gotta get that mask back on. I gotta get that mask back on, and it's exhausting.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. And it's so interesting how for you, you bring up tears, and for me, often would be I'd start to I'd get a little nervous, and I'd get either I just withdraw, or I'd get a little shaky in my voice because I was getting nervous, like the mask is coming off and they're seeing, what I'm really like. And I'd have to just immediately tell myself, okay, you better buck up, and you just got to fake it till you make it. That's what everybody says.
Oh,
Fake
yeah.
it till you make it. I think there's definitely things in that are true about that. You're not feeling super confident in a new skill yet. You got to keep practicing at it, and you got to psych yourself up to do well at a particular task or whatever. I think that all has its place. But man, when you just have this chronic kind of feeling of dread that, oh, I'm really faking it, and someday that it's just gonna I have to keep faking it because that's not me really. That's where it gets to be, there's a lot of angst for the ADHD brain and that person, because we've had to work really hard at maintaining that front.
Taking that a step further, we start to forget what's behind the mask. We start to not be able to recognize ourselves and who we really are because we are so busy trying to fit into society's mold that you lose track of yourself. And I remember one time, I went into a bookstore, right? My friends are all going off in different directions to their, because it was like four of us, to their interests. And I stood there and I realized I don't really even know what I'm interested in
Yeah.
because I have been so busy trying to conform to everything that everybody else wants when I think, what am I truly interested in? Not
Yeah.
what would the kids like? What would, my husband like? What would somebody else like? I could do that all day long.
Yeah,
And
that's so true. Because it's so true. Because you make me think too. Because I guess when you have the mask on for so long, I mean, if you always wore, like a mask for a Halloween party, and you always had that mask on the rest of the year, who could easily start to think, well, I'm just this person now, or this mask. Even though
right.
that's not quite a good example, but if you
Because you
don't have a
lose
mask
sight
on,
of what's under the mask,
yeah,
right?
you
Because
you
you only
lose
see
touch
that
of
mask.
you lose touch of your own self and face, and
And
yeah,
I think like I know when we went through the program together, I did notice how impactful it was just so impactful to be in a group of people who were all neurodivergent and we all came into this. So just to explain, there are 15 of us in our cohort. We all come into the cohort. Most of us have ADHD because we want to help other people with ADHD. And you could slowly see the masks start to fall off of people's faces as we went through the program and we became more comfortable and authentic with ourselves. And I think that was one of the first times where I was like, I can just be me here and I don't need the mask. And then I was able to start looking at who is me.
yeah. I think that's so true, and I'm glad you said that because I absolutely felt that way because until our class, I'd never really processed this stuff, and I mean a little bit, but no, actually hearing other people talk about it, and then I'd be going, "Oh my gosh, that's exactly how I felt." I'm so glad they said that because now I can actually put my own words around that because I understand it a little more. And for me, and I think a lot of people in general, just in our society, you have ADHD or not, it's like it's so easy to put up that front that other people are expecting from you. And I know for me, with my brain and how it processes things, it was my safe space. Because as
Mhm.
long as I did the mask, I knew how people reacted to me with my mask, and it was a safe space because of that. But at the same time, it was keeping a lot of other feelings and processes way deep down inside that were really let come up.
And for me, a lot of that came with the RSD. Just that whole trying to be okay when I'm not okay, right? Like everybody else is like looking at an incident, they're saying it was a small incident. It wouldn't even phase them. They may have forgotten about it, right? And for me, that RSD would just hang on and hang on and hang on. It was always when that mask would slip
Hmm.
was when I really felt like, because as a woman in administration, you're supposed to be tough, right? You're supposed to be this, and I'm like, I'm crying. And I literally could not go to a school one time when we had a crisis because my superintendent said, you won't be able to keep yourself from crying.
Mhm. Hmm.
And it's like, okay, but why is it okay for somebody else who is neurotypical to just be stoic all the time and never show any emotion?
Yeah.
I'm making you
I
think,
know.
aren't I, Jonathan?
It really does. Those kinds of things, those are the very kinds of things that I think with, like you say, with people that are not neurodivergent, that they can a lot of times they'll go on and just totally forget about something. It doesn't even enter their mind again. But that man, we can go back and just we can start to ruminate and really
Hmm.
think. And I think that's one of the really great things that I have learned, more recently is ways to put that in perspective. That you know what, this is not because you're just ruminating about this or that, but remember how this is one of the things that the way you process things. Remember, use some strategies to navigate that, and don't get down on yourself. Just instead stay curious about, okay, how can I navigate this in a healthy way?
Say that again. Stay.
Curious. That has become, since this whole journey started for me, that has become one of my favorite words because it puts things so differently. Because I'm a learner. I love to learn. If I'm not learning, I'm not very happy, but I love to go and on these strength scales you do. My top one is always learner. I say that because sometimes if I feel like, oh my gosh, I'm just not getting this, or yeah, and this is where I'm, the lazy, stupid, or crazy. I must be so slow at learning this or navigating this. And you can start to get down on yourself. But instead, I remind myself, remember the curious word where, okay, this is happening, or you're feeling, or you're thinking this way. Stay curious. And how can you navigate this in a positive, healthy way? And suddenly, with that thought, the cloud lifts at least part way where I can go, yeah, I'm going to figure this out.
Mm-hmm.
And so being curious instead of being self-critical has made a big difference for me.
Yeah, and I know you and I have coached each other a couple of times and some difficult topics. And we've coached with other people in our cohort, and now we're coaching other people. And I personally love the process of coaching, but what I get out of coaching, I still continue to get out of coaching. And I think the biggest thing is that idea that we can step back, be curious, and then say, what's in my way? How do I get around it, over it, or through it? And what strategies can I use?
Mhm.
And that just learning the thought process of not seeing a barrier and turning around and going the other way, but saying, this is my barrier, and how do I get through it, over it, or around it?
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, wanting to learn about a situation and yourself in that situation and to be healthier and happier going through it if it's a hard thing, it makes such a difference, and it keeps me willing to not just put myself in a particular slot or hole and say this is how I am, and what, instead I can go, okay, you know what, I'm a growing, living human being, and I can always make progress, and how do I do it here? And boy, it's so much better than, self-awareness can be painful, but
Mhm.
it also can really open a lot of doors to new insights. And that's exactly what my late diagnosis has done.
And I think the word that comes to my mind a lot with coaching and what I've seen with my clients and what I've seen with myself is suddenly there's hope. Where a lot of us have gotten to the point where we are so defeated. It's like I'm just not going to be able to do this. I'm not capable. There's no hope for me, right? And through coaching, I developed hope, and I see my clients develop that hope as well. And so I think that that's a huge aspect of what we do.
That's so true. I mean, when I went in and got my diagnosis, I mean, I still visit with that doctor periodically. And he reminded me a couple of times ago, he said, Jonathan, I just want you to remember from the time you came into my office until now, it is a night and day difference. You were so down and out when you came into my office.
Mhm.
And I go, "Yeah, you're so right. I'm glad you reminded me because I was so discouraged because I didn't really see anything ever changing for me. And then I look at from back then, 6, 7 years ago to now, and it is night and day and I don't know how much change people see in me in that period of time on the outside because I got good at the mask and I got good at being healthier. But I'll tell you what, on the inside, it is just it's a stark contrast
Mhm.
for the good. I'm so grateful. I have my
Yeah.
life back,
Yeah.
which is more important than anything for me because I can function
Absolutely.
better and, support those around me more and love my family better. And, it's
Oh, now
all the
see,
difference in
you
the
just
world.
rang a bell for me right there. Love my family better. Learning that I had ADHD and all the things that I learned about ADHD in adults, because I knew a lot about about ADHD before I found out that I had ADHD, but I didn't know a lot about adult ADHD. I learned a lot more about adult ADHD. And when I did, it made my relationships with my family better because I didn't realize how often I felt like they were rejecting me when they weren't, and how that would cause problems for us, right? And so if I when I suddenly was able to look at things objectively and say, is this RSD or is this actuality? And use some strategies to calm myself, that made my communication to my family so much better. And knowing all those things and sharing it with your family so that they know how to love you better.
Absolutely. I mean, when you're just saying that, I was thinking, yeah, if the ADHD and the things you're struggling with it on the inside, if it's causing you this preoccupation and tearing you up inside, there's no way you can pay attention as well on the outside to the rest of your world because you're preoccupied. And especially too, if you're preoccupied and you don't know why you're preoccupied, it's so hard. And
Oh
now,
yeah.
my
How
wife
many
knows
times do you
now.
say I'm anxious, but I have no idea why?
I know.
I
And
don't know.
now, yeah, my wife is my best diagnostician I have because she sees me and she can point something out to me and in just the right way in a non-judgmental, or she just say, hey, and she'll make an observation. Oh, you're exactly right. I didn't notice that. And things are so much easier be engaged in all the elements of my life because I don't have that preoccupation where I've turned inward so much.
hmm We talked about like all the things that are going on in your brain when you're in a conversation and you're trying to concentrate on what the person is saying and are you a good listener? But you also have those weird little distractions that you just can't ignore that aren't internal that I tend to do when I'm in a conversation with somebody. It is the typical squirrel comment, you
Yeah,
know? It's like you're talking and suddenly you're like, isn't that a beautiful flower bouquet? Oh my gosh, it's so lovely. So I often feel sorry for people who are trying to like herd you like like a cat, right? But I've also had somebody say to me that even though it is really difficult to follow a conversation with me sometimes because I can go off on these tangents and I notice that humming that's in the background. You probably can't hear it, but there's a humming back there. And
yeah,
I notice all of these different things. I find myself very distracted from the conversation, but my friends, now that I'm able to articulate and say this has nothing to do with you as a person. I love you dearly. I want to hear all the things that you're saying, but these things distract me. They've gotten really good at redirecting me. And where in the past that would have felt like a rejection because of the coaching and because of all the work that I've done on myself and those types of things, I don't see it as a negative thing. I see them helping me
that's
get
so
back on
great.
track.
Oh, yeah, and doesn't that make such a difference? I mean, it just you can let your guard down and know that you don't need to pretend because someone, if they're able to, help you with that, it's just like, oh, thank you.
hmm
Yeah,
But it's
yeah.
really hard. I mean, it's hard to disclose that. And then deciding who you're going to disclose to.
I know. It's hard because all the time in our society and social media, and it's just amplified a bit. So many harsh judgments are being made about all of us, everybody back and forth. It's happening all the time. And so it's easy for me to just think, why would I ever open up to you? Because I'm just going to get lambasted too,
Right. Well, I don't know about you, but some of the comments that I hear when I tell people that I have ADHD that just trigger me is, oh, I have a little bit of that too.
Yeah.
I-
Or you know what it is for me? It's the phenomenon in Western civilization.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's the eye roll.
Oh, yes, yes, the
Okay.
eye roll.
In modern civil, you don't see the eye roll as far as I've noticed in third world countries. I could be wrong, but I never see that on any documentaries. And when I'm
Yeah,
watching, and
I
when I've
can't
been to
say.
some countries, it's always it's our Western and our modern civilization. It's the eye roll,
It's
and
the eye roll.
it's going to happen. But it's just like, yep, that's what I've learned to expect with things like this is the eye roll and to not let it trigger me. I have to let
hmm
it not trigger me. Yeah.
Yeah, but when you get that eye roll or when you get that, I have a little of that person doesn't understand HD is. And it's like you have to decide at that point, does this person have enough ability to be open and understanding, or does the limited knowledge that this person have prohibit me from sharing this with them because it could turn bad?
Right. And yeah, exactly. And it's for me too, to your very point, it's like I try to stay curious here and say, okay, can I make something of this reaction to turn it to a positive?
hmm
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. To top it all off, when people question or don't believe that you have ADHD, you're successful. I've gotten that one but you're so successful. How could you possibly have ADHD? And it's like, do you know how many successful people are out there with ADHD? That whole misconception that people with ADHD are less intelligent is crazy because we're working three times as hard as you to do just as well as you. So
Mhm.
that, it's because we're doing three times as much of the work. We're smart
Yeah.
enough to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And we're resilient enough to do that. And we are like problem solvers galore.
You make me think how we have to work so much harder to be as successful. I wish I could go back to that, 11, 12-year-old kid, 14-year-old kid in high school, Jonathan back then, and just put my arm around him and say, do not worry about this. You're don't get down on yourself. You're going to be just fine. And of course, I don't exist in that age anymore, but it makes me want to help other people that I know are going through a similar experience of self-talk and they don't know, or they've been diagnosed and they're stigmatized.
Hmm.
And that's another big side of getting diagnosed early is what if you're stigmatized by this? And I just want to come up to people and just put my arm around them and say, it's okay. You're going to be okay. You just stay in the batter's box and work hard and be kind to yourself. Don't be so hard on yourself. If you can't figure something out, or if you're frustrated how you're processing this or that, or you just don't understand, do not, it's impossible to not do it some, but I would just say, just don't worry about that. You are going to be okay. But there are lots of resources and people in this world that understand that now and can help you. And
Hmm.
you're going to be okay. I would just tell people over and over, you're going to be okay. Not just because you're going to be okay, because a lot of people end up not being okay if they don't get some assistance, but there's so many insights out there now. You're
Sure.
not alone on this. You're not.
But it feels lonely. But then again, I know that people with ADHD find each other a lot,
Hmm. Yeah.
right? I mean, like all your neurodiverse friends, you start to think everybody in the world must be neurodiverse, right? Because like all of my friends are. And then you find out that there are these groups of people who are neurotypical that hang out together too.
No.
And they may have like one ADHD friend or whatever. And I know that I had a conversation with my son-in-law not too long ago, who is the theater drama film guy, and we were talking about working in theater with all the neurodivergent folks. And I know that you too have done theater and you run into that population more there.
Yeah.
And so then I did realize, like as we were talking, I was thinking about, yes, I am more easily myself when I'm doing a production. But I think it's that same kind of thing that we had when we were in our group together, is that everybody else is neurodivergent too. And you almost feel sorry for the neurotypical person.
Yeah, it is true. And yeah, see, having been that's a really good point to bring up, and I have to think more about that because I think you're exactly right. But for me, when I did theater, I didn't know about my condition, and I just kept my mask up, and other people did too. And it'd be so revealing to go back and just do some of those experiences again to kind of give yourself and others permission to have that mask come down. And but you do kind of gravitate
Mhm.
together. And so true. It's just amazing.
Well, and I wonder if we are drawn to drama. I don't know if it's the chicken before the egg kind of thing, but
Mm.
like neurodivergent folks are oftentimes drawn to the, drama, film, those types of things. And I don't know if it's because we've learned to act that we're so good at masking, or if it's because we've been masking so well all our lives that we can act really well.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's really something for me to think about too, because I that's a good question. Which comes first?
Because
That's
I know
fascinating.
that for me, like half my life, I felt like I've been acting in a play, you know?
Yeah, I think that's for me too. And you when you realize that, and for me, realizing when I would do that in years past, now to go instead of thinking, okay, here's my mask and I can't let it down. Instead, it's becoming more and more rewarding to go, okay, this is real life, and I'm not going to use a mask because I really want to, just like from Dead Poets Society. I want to suck the marrow out of life and just really enjoy it. And then suddenly, instead of that mask, I'll feel a lot more alive than I ever did before. And I'm so much more content too with the many things I have that my mask, also you put on a mask, you can't see as well, that my mask, having it on, kept me from seeing some of the real blessings in my life.
Mm-hmm.
When I have that mask off, my eyes aren't looking through two holes anymore. I can see periphery all around me, and I can see just how incredibly blessed I am with my life without seeing a pretend version of myself in life. It's just me, and it's a risk, and it's kind of scary at first. It's so much better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Jonathan, I have really enjoyed talking with you today. It's been
Me too.
wonderful as always, because Jonathan and I have a lot of really good conversations. We have been known to just talk on and on. Thank you so much for coming on. I hope you'll consider making another appearance.
I'd love
Uh,
to. Yeah, absolutely.
awesome. Is there anything else, one last thing that you would like, a knowledge nugget that you would like to drop on us today?
Ooh, it's been fun, but no, I think the only thing I would say in conclusion, please, 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 no matter what your situation, I don't care. There are no exceptions to this. Please always have hope.
Mm.
There's never a reason to have no hope. Never.
Can we add to that? Always
Yeah.
have hope and give yourself grace.
Yes. Amen. Yeah, absolutely. Be kind to yourself.
Hmm.
Hope in itself and having that grace, just it will give you a lifeline more than you realize in the moment, and then help it, just nurture it to build. And there's always hope. There's always things that will help you, that you'll be guided to discover them.
Yes. And if people are interested in working with you as a coach, how can they reach you?
So the best way to reach me right now is through my email, and that email is forwardfocuscoaching@protonmail.com.
Okay, and we'll put that in the details below too.
Perfect.
So again, Jonathan, I just want to thank you. It's been a great conversation. I hope all the butterflies on the wall have enjoyed it. If you guys have enjoyed it, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you next time.
Awesome. Thank you, Janine.
Thank you.